Okay, everyone, we are going to be starting block 2 now. So these are all Mission 6 experiments. We are now starting with oral presentation number 6 from Kamloops, Thompson, British Columbia, Canada. This is a flight experiment and grade 7.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and these are my partners, Hunter, Kieran, and Jordan, and our sponsor teacher, Miss Berg. Our co-investigators were our classmates. We are from Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada, and we are proud to be representing BC School District 73 and 12 participating schools who took part in the competition to participate in Mission 6. Our research question was, how was crystal growth affected by microgravity? We wanted to create crystals by a precipitation reaction where the solutions were mixed by diffusion through water. Based on previous space research, we came up with our hypothesis, which is that the crystals formed in microgravity will be larger in size than the Earth crystals. The space-formed crystals will also be more perfect than the ones formed on the ground.
After testing many reactions, we chose this final reaction for our experiment because of differences we observed in the crystals formed when we mix the solutions through water at different rates. The chemical reaction is barium chloride plus sodium thiosulfate forming barium thiosulfate solid and sodium chloride. We chose a 3-compartment mini-lab and placed distilled water in the middle compartment, barium chloride solution at one end, and sodium thiosulfate solution at the other. We placed cellulose filters inside the clamps in the hopes that they would slow down the diffusion and keep any solid formed in the middle compartment. The experiments were started by opening clamps to allow the mixing by diffusion to happen. The ground experiments and the one on the ISS were open for 3.5 weeks to allow the solid to form, and then the clamps were closed. We used a test experiment apparatus to develop a procedure for opening the experiments and recovering the crystals. Crystals were collected from each mini-lab by gravity filtering the mini-lab contents into a pre-weighed filter apparatus. We then let all crystal samples air dry for 2 days before we obtained the mass of the crystals formed in each experiment plus the filters from the mini-lab. We then subtracted the mass of 2 filters to get the mass of the crystals.
When we compared the crystal mass obtained with that expected by the reaction based on the amounts used, the 2 ground experiments had calculated yields of 105 and 104%. The space experiment had a calculated yield of 90%. There may be errors in our measured amounts, and as well as the mass of the filters subtracted. We noted that the crystals formed on the ISS were generally longer and more transparent than the ground ones. The ground ones formed clumps of crystals, where the space ones were single needle-like crystals which appeared more perfect. We searched through each experiment sample to find the longest crystals so we could examine them. We took random samples of crystals formed from each experiment, as well as the longest crystals, and mounted them on metal stubs with carbon tape to examine them under a scanning electron microscope and an optical microscope. We recorded digital images of all our samples and crystal mounts, and then we used these images to measure the sizes of our largest crystals in ground and space experiments. The largest crystals all have the same basic shape. They are longer than they are wide and look like fat needles. We used ImageJ software and the scales from our microscope studies to obtain the crystal lengths. The longest crystal formed in microgravity was 8.2 millimeters long, 2.5 times larger than the longest ground crystal, which was 3.3 millimeters long. There were more smaller crystals formed in the ground experiments than in the microgravity one, and many of the crystals appear to have been broken at the end as they appear layered. We did run qualitative tests with the energy dispersive spectrometer attached to the SEM to see the atoms the crystals were composed of.
We also had the opportunity to work with Dr. Lee Groat from the University of British Columbia. We prepared small samples of the crystals grown on the ground as well as microgravity for Dr. Groat to take back to his lab. He was then able to determine the atomic structure using X-ray diffraction. This shows how the atoms are arranged in each crystal. The structures of the crystals from both the ground and space crystals are the same, meaning that the arrangements of the atoms of the two samples are identical. In conclusion, barium thiosulfate crystals were formed in both experiments. On average, the crystals grown in microgravity were larger and more perfect looking. The largest space crystals were 2.5 times longer than the largest ground crystals. The atomic structure of the space and ground crystals are the same. We would like to thank our research mentors at Thompson Rivers University, as well as the University of British Columbia, as well as everyone who provided additional support for us to attend this conference. We would like to thank the SSEP and our national and local partners for giving us this opportunity to participate in a scientific research project as a team which has had a huge impact on all of us. Thank you for your attention. Now, are there any questions?
I would like to say that we are very excited to have heard the first presentation from Canada at the Student Spaceflight Experiments Program. Are there any questions for the Kamloops team? Okay, let's thank Kamloops one more time.